Hello, and welcome back to The Void if you're returning. Welcome if you're new, and thank you for joining me here. Today we'll be talking about the case of the disappearance of a teenager by the name of Mekayla Bali. Now, Mekayla Bali was a Canadian teenager, and she disappeared in the year 2016. The thing about this case is that there's a lot of CCTV footage of the day that she disappeared, of her various movements throughout the town that she lived in, and then she just vanishes and is never seen or heard from again. See, Mekayla Bali was born on July 2nd, 1999, and resided in a town called Yorkton, which is in Saskatchewan, Canada, with her mother, grandmother, and two siblings. Mekayla didn't know who her father was, but she had a very good relationship with her mother. She was described by many as a shy, sweet, but introverted girl. For the most part, she seemed to be quite lonely, as despite having friends in school, she never really seemed to hang out with them outside of that, and they themselves didn't know how Mekayla spent her time outside of school. So let's talk about the days leading up to her disappearance. Mekayla had three friends who she considered quite close to her, and on April 11th, 2016, these three friends and Mekayla would have lunch together. While they always talked about moving out of their small town of Yorkton into a bigger city after finishing high school, they took note that on this particular occasion, Mekayla wouldn't stop talking about moving away. Mekayla actually told a number of conflicting stories on that day. She would tell close friends that a person that she had been talking to by the name of Christopher was coming to town to meet her, while she would tell others that she was going to go on vacation to a town called Regina, or Regina, I'm not quite sure how that's pronounced, with her family. That night she would text a total of 3 different people. The first of these texts would be sent to one of her best friends by the name of Amy, saying that she needed help, but Mekayla wouldn't actually respond to Amy after sending this text initially. The second text would be sent to another of her best friends named Shelby, and they would talk about a boy. And her third text would be sent to her ex-boyfriend, expressing how she was unhappy and was thinking of going to Regina for a couple of days. Now, on the day of her disappearance, which is the next day, April 12, 2016, at 6:41 a.m., Mekayla would text a friend by the name of Oksana, asking to be driven to a bank. She claimed that she had $5,000 in a bank account. Her friend Oksana would decline to take her to the bank. Later on that morning, at I assume the normal time, both Mekayla and her mother would get up and get dressed for their day. Mekayla would then be dropped off at the Sacred Heart High School by her grandmother around 8 a.m., and the school's Wi-Fi network would positively show her being checked in at exactly 8:08 a.m. However, by 8:26, she would be seen leaving the building on the school surveillance system, after putting her things from her bag into her locker. Her ex-boyfriend would apparently text her and ask her why she was missing from their first class, which they shared together, and Mekayla would tell him that she was on the other side of town at the time. Mekayla would then walk to the nearest TD bank to her once she left the school grounds, and she would wait for it to open, as it wasn't open when she got there. Once it was open, she withdrew 55 Canadian dollars from her bank account and then would head to the nearest pawn shop, where she unsuccessfully tried to pawn off 2 silver rings. The shop declined to purchase the rings from her, as they held little to no value. From there, Mekayla would head south and enter a Tim Hortons around 9 a.m. She would sit in a booth after purchasing coffee. She was there on her phone, presumably to use the restaurant's Wi-Fi, and would promptly make another phone call. She remained there for approximately 13 minutes, glancing back at the entrance, which was behind her, almost as if she was waiting for someone to show up. She would then get up and leave the coffee shop, and then re-enter, only to once again leave, but through a different exit. She would leave the restaurant, and the surveillance would capture her walking around various stores, parking lots, and she would also be captured with her phone to her ear, speaking on the phone, in a phone call. Upon police inspection, however, it was determined that she may have been using a third-party app such as FaceTime's voice call feature, or any other number of apps that use voice over IP services to make these phone calls, as her actual phone records did not show any indication that she was making actual phone calls at the time. So if you use any of these services, like any voice over IP service, obviously it's not going to show up on like your T-Mobile or Verizon or whatever phone carriers they have in Canada. It's not going to show up on their logs because you're not using your phone number, you're using the internet to make the call. They think this because, obviously, they subpoenaed the phone company, and upon receiving her phone records, there were no matching phone calls at the time when when she was captured on these closed-circuit television systems. She would then return to the same Tim Hortons for roughly a half hour, and this time she was recorded to have been on at least 6 different phone calls. At 10:39 a.m., she was seen on another phone call and would glance around her as if looking for someone to show up. After this phone call, Mekayla would get up from her booth and go sit at another table where there was another woman already sitting there. Police would track down this woman, and she would say that Mekayla had asked her for help with booking a hotel room. She did not tell the woman why, and she did not tell the woman which hotel she needed, both of which the woman didn't inquire about before telling her no. Then on the CCTV footage, Mekayla is seen leaving that table and going back to the original booth that she was at, and getting on another call before leaving the Tim Hortons once again. At around noon, Mekayla would return to school and be seen talking to 2 people in the cafeteria. Police would talk to these students, and they would say that Mekayla spoke about taking a bus to Regina, and that it was here that a student noticed that Mekayla actually had 2 phones on her. She would then be caught on cameras leaving again at about 12:03 p.m. Shortly after this interaction, CCTV footage would show Mekayla at a bus stop. An employee that worked at the bus stop that day would say that she asked when the next bus for Regina was, but that Mekayla would never actually end up buying a bus ticket. She was seen staying around the bus stop. She would purchase food and then would leave around 2 p.m., so about 2 hours later, and from that point on, she's never seen or heard from again. This left investigators to assume that Mekayla had to have been picked up from the bus stop, as she's never seen on any of the CCTV around that bus stop leaving. They caught her going in, and then she was never seen again, so she had to have been picked up and taken out in a car. Her grandmother would then arrive at school to take her to a violin lesson at the end of the day, but Mekayla never showed up for her grandmother to pick her up, and this prompted her to call Mekayla's mother. Her mother would immediately check their slush fund, which was kept in case of emergencies, but it was untouched. And based on the size of the backpack that she was seen carrying, it was established that she would only be able to carry enough clothes for a few days worth of time away. By 7 a.m. the next day, Mekayla's phone had either been turned off or the battery died. So there was no longer any open line of communication to Mekayla at that point. Now, after her actual disappearance, police would interview other students and teachers at the school, and while her teachers would say that she was acting a little different, there was nothing drastic enough for them to take note or need to feel like they would need to speak with her. Shelby, her friend from earlier, would tell authorities that Mekayla was talking to a boy named Josh, while Amy would have revealed that she was speaking to somebody by the name of Christopher, as mentioned earlier. She didn't tell her friends anything more about these people that she was speaking to, and as such, police theorized that Mekayla had been using multiple third-party apps to communicate with these people, as she had no other phone records showing any outside communication. So third-party apps like Snapchat, like the dreaded Kik, like any one of these messaging services like WhatsApp as well, WeChat if you are of that persuasion. These all obviously wouldn't show up on your phone records. It's not like a regular text message or a regular call. If you call somebody and say WhatsApp, for example, it's going to go over the internet and not use your phone number. And as such, that would just show up as a use of your wireless data instead of an actual phone call through your not internet service provider, that rather than through your service provider. While examining the CCTV footage of her inside of that Tim Hortons, her friends would point out that she was carrying a large book bag, which was an immediate red flag, because she never carried anything larger than, say, a purse to school due to her lack of wanting to carry around books everywhere. Now, the police at this point had no more footage from the day, and therefore relied on witnesses. And one particular witness would say that they saw her leaving with a man who had a big red cross tattooed on the back of his arm. After releasing a sketch of the tattoo, the man would come forward and he would state that he was only holding the door open for her at the time and that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. This would turn out to be true as his story checked out when the police looked into it further. Police obviously eventually tried to track down both Josh and Christopher. Christopher, according to Mekayla's friends, was planning to visit Saskatchewan. Mekayla's ex-boyfriend, who she was still friends with, told police that Mekayla had told him that Christopher was going to be visiting the Canadian province of Saskatchewan in order to see his mother. But after a police search of Christopher's home, as they were able to identify him, it was determined that there was no evidence that he was even in Canada at the time that Mekayla went missing. And Christopher would later tell CBC News that Mekayla had previously attempted suicide, but she had become better and was on the path to recovery. Authorities would also try to track down the mysterious Josh, but they could only locate someone who Mekayla knew named Josh, but he isn't believed to have been the one that she was communicating with at the time, since she hadn't seen him in years. Yeah, she hadn't seen him in years. He was an old acquaintance. The police were completely unable to find anything else. They received hundreds of tips, but none of them panned out to any amount of substantive help in the case. The most promising piece of evidence seemed to be Mekayla's phone. It took nearly 10 months, however, for the police to get access to Mekayla's social media due to different privacy laws. So what that means is essentially each one of the apps that we use, say you have a Facebook account in the Facebook app, and you have Instagram. Instagram is owned by Facebook, so you might go through the same process for that. But you have a Twitter and a Snapchat. You see, the authorities would have to go to each of these different companies and subpoena them for your account information. So it's not like they have immediate access to all of this stuff. Because of privacy laws, they can't just get into your account. There's certain legal channels they have to go through, and these processes take very long. That's why it took them 10 months, nearly 10 months, for them to get access to her social media. By this time, they discovered that Mekayla actually had multiple Instagram accounts, and that one of them had a very large following, but it had no photos, which led them to believe that the photos had been deleted by this point. And in the bio or about me section of the Instagram page, it just said the word goodbye. Approximately 2 months before she vanished, Mekayla had made a post to social media with a photo of a Snapchat profile. If you don't know what that is, it's like, it's just a way to add the person as a friend on Snapchat. And under it she wrote, "Looking for Snapchat friends, because I have none in real life. Add me. Please don't be a greasy fuck and send me gross ass nudes. Just looking for a friend." Police theorized that someone had contacted her that day, and that Mekayla may have made plans to meet with them, possibly in Regina. Upon further investigation, it is believed that Mekayla may have been texting people through an app called Kick, where your messages remain private. I know a few years ago, actually I used to be on Kick as well, but I got off. A few years ago, I don't remember exactly which year, but the Kick had actually gotten in trouble and was all over the news because, as I said, your messages remain private, and that is because every message you send on there is encrypted. So only the sender and the receiver are able to view the messages. Anybody that's trying to intercept them on the way back and forth just gets a garbled mess of characters, if they get anything at all. It's all encrypted. And also, outside of that, unlike a platform like Facebook, where you have to be friends first, or Instagram, where most of the time both the accounts have to follow each other, or one has to follow the other, or Snapchat, where she was asking people to add her. On Kick, you don't need to add somebody to send them a message. As long as if you can just find them, you can send anybody that's on Kik a message. And Kik got in trouble, or was at the center of a controversy, because there was a large number of people who were taking advantage of this, and the fact that there were a large number of young teens and children on Kik to essentially groom these children, and there were a few abductions as well. So they believe that Mekayla had been using Kik, and that this her use of this app may have been tied to, one, why there were no phone records and they couldn't tell who she was texting to and from, because obviously they would have to get that information from Kik, and because it's encrypted, not even Kik would be able to show them the information because they don't have it. Only the person who sends and receives the messages can actually read them because they're encrypted. Not even Kik knows what they're telling each other. And because it wouldn't show up on her phone logs from the phone company. That's just mobile data traffic that they can see. It's highly suspected by the police that due to the complete absence of any phone records, that she was texting individuals through this app on that day of her disappearance, and that she had arranged any meetups through that app. So without access to her account, as in being able to log in as her, they wouldn't be able to see any of the messages that were sent or received to that account. Not even Kik could help them. Police would also check local hotels to see that if any of them had contact with her, but they didn't. They never did go and check any of the hotels in Regina, as they didn't believe that she actually made it to Regina. Now, 5 years later, her family is still looking for her. There are many theories online, one of them being that she was looking for her father, while others are more intense. Some people believe that Mekayla was a victim of human trafficking and had been kidnapped and unfortunately sold into human trafficking. And unless she is found, or some new information comes out that leads to an actual resolution of this case, we may never truly know what happened to her on that day after 2 p.m. So, if you have never heard of this case before, I'm happy to have shed light on this case to at least a couple of sets of new eyes. It's important to note that there's a lot of trafficking in persons is a much larger issue than people even think about a lot of the time, and these are people that anybody can see anywhere. So if any of you have seen someone that resembles Mekayla Bali, or going forward in the future ever see someone that resembles this young woman, she was a teenager then. It's only been 5 years, so she shouldn't look too much different. I mean, outside of her hair, maybe. Just keep your eye out. If you see something, say something. Don't be afraid to approach people. If they're in trouble, they'll appreciate it. If not, then the worst you'll get is a no thank you, that's not me, probably. I mean, I know that I would feel thankful that someone, cared enough to try to look out for me, even if I wasn't in any danger. So if you see something, say something. Just don't get yourself in any danger trying to do that. We don't all have to be heroes in that sense. But I just want to say thank you for coming to Stare Into the Void with me again this week. If you see it fit to do so, please subscribe, please like and leave a comment, and down below, as always, there will be a link to my Twitter and Patreon. So go ahead and check those out. Follow me on Twitter if you want. But until the next time we get together here and stare into the void, hope that it does not stare long into us, and talk about true crime. Stay safe out there. I love you guys. Goodbye.